Good morning. I hope you are having a lovely day. So, I want to talk to you about something that I'm noticing since AI has come out and people are relying on it pretty heavily. Um, I feel like something we really need to consider with this is holding humanity over headlines and community over clickbait. And what I mean by that, really think about what you're publishing before you publish it. Something happened recently in the community, and it came up in conversation. I didn't know about it because I'm not typically looking at the news that much, other than the specific sources that I choose to look from. And basically, a local paper had put some stuff out regarding something pretty terrible that happened that could have been written in a very compassionate and supportive way. But instead, it was shared in a way that was very clickbaity, didn't really address the pain in which people were going through. And I thought, I bet they probably used AI. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't. But I do want to say, I really want to suggest if you're using AI to write stuff for yourself, especially stuff that you're publicly sharing with people, which is probably how most people are using AI because I think they're wanting to look a certain way or get work done for themselves, right? Which I totally get if that's how you're using it. That's your choice, right? And your creative license to do that. But please, people, like keep your compassion, you know? And so what I want to encourage you to do as a reader, because we can't control how what people publish. We can't control how people choose to be. We can only control ourselves, right? So, and I say this with with love, and I say this in a way that it's not just what you read, it's everything you see and you consume in the world, right? Whether to hear it, you see it, whether it's in person or on a screen, really bringing your critical thinking in and your compassion with anything that you read. When you read something, you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? Is just like, what is this person experiencing? And maybe, just maybe, I want to encourage people to, instead of jumping on like the troll boat of like, not the good troll, which is just like, getting a space of like a good friend of mine talks about trolling it like at home. And I'm like, I love that saying because I feel that some days you work and you get some of your best work done doing that. But I'm talking about like the old school, like internet troll concept, which is like, why put your energy into tearing people down and putting your energy into like, you know, pointing out what's wrong with a situation in the sense of like, in a mean way versus building up. So I realize I'm totally being critical right now. And I think that's an important part of critical thinking. But my point of like putting this out here is to try to make the world a better place, is to try to build you up and to build other people up in the community. And what I want to suggest is when we read things, when you read things, when you comment on things, what if instead of your comment being like, ask yourself, am I building somebody up right now or am I tearing somebody down? You know, newsletter I talked about building together with AI. Now, my goal is not really to lean into AI much or at all if I can. Now, I'm really trying to figure it out, look at it, see. I don't know. I'm still on my journey, but I am not an early adopter. I really consider myself a bit more of like a Luddite with things in the early 2020, I came up with this thing in my mind for myself, and it was lo-fi, low-buy living in the 90s. And it was a thread for me to follow as a compass because I could see the world shifting in a direction I didn't want to. And I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I want to share this more with people because I've had my journey for the past 5 years doing that. And I want to encourage other people to do that. So when I say this, when I talk about building with AI, it's you actually building yourself and not losing your humanness, not losing your compassion while we're on this ride. Because I think what I'm seeing people do is get AI to do things for them. They pump it out, people get excited because they're like, oh, this is good. And then they put out there their heart. Have they run it through how this is actually going to make somebody feel? Because AI, a computer, probably isn't doing that. So if you're finding that you're seeing more headlines out there that seem more cutthroat or just seem more, emboldening and impassioning of like hatred and like segregation and separation, it's like AI has built itself off of the algorithm, right? The algorithm is based off of pain points because pain points is what often makes people look like a train, like look, they look at a train wreck, right? They can't help it. And so basically we have, if you've not read the book by Jaron Lanier, my God, I can't remember what it is, but I'll have to look it up. But it's a book by Jaron Lanier. And it's like the case of like breaking up a technology or something like that. I can't totally remember. But in this, he talks about how he was in Silicon Valley at the start of social media and all this stuff. And he started to realize how messy it was because in the creation of algorithms, they basically could see that what the robots and the things picked up, what the algorithms picked up, these mathematical equations, was that what sold was what was painful to people. And so it just started spitting more of that out, which is why, I love animals. I love animals. I really struggle with seeing anything suffering as many of you do, right? I started to see really awful, gory images of things with animals. And I was like, I can't, like, this is hurtful. I understand this stuff's happening, but like, I can't handle looking at this. And so early on, like 2017, 16, I was like cleaning up my feed because this is just awful and hard, right? So I want to encourage you to clean up what you're consuming, obviously, right? Not new news. But because that's what has sold, AI, the way it scraped the internet, which is where it's getting its information from, or anything you feed it in terms of questions, is largely basing its intelligence model based off of a lot of stuff that's very painful for people, that is very triggering for people, that is very fueled on black and white thinking, because black and white thinking is what gets people to react and go, oh my gosh, no. And so you have the thing that AI is going to be built upon right now, because it's based off of all the stuff. And the internet, the large capacity of the internet, what's on the internet now in the past, let's say 10 years, I'm just gonna throw out a number, is largely what has been posted on social media and the stuff that's gotten people emotionally riled up, right? So you have AI repeating that, not with its cognitive function of compassion or critical thinking in the sense of a human way. Data, we're talking about data, we're talking about numbers, we're talking about what sells. Just like when you watch the news and it's all really harsh, awful stuff, there's a reason for that because, again, the train wreck effect. People are like, can't not watch it. Well, we really have to hold on to our hearts. I feel like we have to hold on to our humanity, because right now, AI is also building its intelligence based off of all of the anger and anxiety and fear that is in the world right now, rightfully so. Okay. So the early stages of AI, think about your childhood as like your petri dish. Okay. We are all kind of programmed a little bit. Our family units are often a part of that. Obviously, our culture is a part of that. Our schooling systems, like all these different pieces are a part of that. But within the first 5 years, that is a huge piece, right? In terms of looking at the science of like human behavioral patterning. And I always like to see it as a petri dish. We become our own culture, like on a small scale in our families, that how we react, how we respond, who we become is the culture of our household. Or maybe we were bumped around from different places. Whatever your experience was, it's shaping you. And that is a base, a ground in which you are operating from there forward. Well, that's kind of what's happening with AI right now. AI was launched during a really bad time of humanity to be launched. It would have been cool to me if it was like early on before, all the social media things became this monetized thing that was based off of fear and based off of, clickbait and hateful headlines and all of that stuff. But this is what we're dealing with. And so what I want to do, like what I hope to do, and I hope all of you agree, in this sense is like, I think most of us wish that the world could be a more peaceful place. And one of the ways to get there is through loving communication and compassion. And if suddenly people are no longer even using their own voice to communicate and they're relying on AI that is built in this 5-year petri dish, let's say it's not 5 years, we're still in the beginning. Like, this is our chance as humans to try to make a difference in a positive way. I personally have this image in my mind of like, well, what if people that are not trying to just go out there and like kill it and make a living and like make some viral thing or, whatever people are trying to do, like, I like to call the tap dancing peanut, right? Everybody's just like jazz hands, like, look at me, look at me. And it's like really ugly and really painful to see. But that's the world we live in right now because everything is online instead of in human interactions, which is one piece of us like that I think we can return to, which you all know is actually doing more of the human in-person stuff. But as we're building AI and the intelligence of it, which is largely going to be based off of what's already in the internet and what we put out there, why not put out stuff where maybe, I don't know. I just keep having this imagination in my mind of like there being some compassionate AI because we're putting out compassionate voices. And is it possible for us to do that? I wish there was a particular sect of AI that was literally just based off of that, where clickbait wasn't allowed, where hateful headlines weren't allowed, where it was not applauded for people to be not compassionate because gore sells, but instead it was not even applauded, but people were like, yeah, that, because things were based off of truth and love and support for one another and grace and compassion and a space of understanding instead of trying to cut people down. So if you're using I want you to really consider when you're using it. Now, if your goal is to get numbers and likes, you know, you're going to do whatever you want to do because that's your goal. If your goal is to make the world a better place, because, and it might include that too, but like to make it, that's your baseline. That's something in your petri dish where you're not willing to sacrifice. You're not willing to sacrifice. Like you have a root of compassion in your heart and in your work and your truth, and you're not selling out to that. Really, if you find yourself in this gray space of navigating, how do I, there's this whole dialogue of like, there's a whole dialogue. If you don't learn it now, like you're going to be obsolete. And I think that's another fear mongering thing because I hear people say in the same like 5-word terms. So I think it's another brainwashing thing that's out there. I don't think that's true. I just don't. I don't care. I don't care if anybody believes me or not. Maybe I'll become obsolete because of that. I feel like it's already happened because I haven't jumped on it, but I don't care, because I believe there's another way. And I feel like we're riding a wave. And I feel like there are people that, like those of us that don't want to jump on the bandwagon. And I think that's okay. And I think that the more of us that speak up about that and are comfortable with that, and we're comfortable in the messy ride, because I don't know what I'm going to use or not use at any point. I have no idea. I'm a human in the midst of this mess and trying to figure it out just like you are. I will say I've been very hesitant to try to sign on to anything because I don't want all my data out there. And especially, I'm definitely not going to put my business data on there. Like it's very important for me to keep that separate because of just like, compliance and just respecting people's privacy. I was at a meeting one day and I heard somebody, it was talking about AI and sharing stuff on free versions or not free versions of like ChatGPT and stuff. And there was literally a medical person in the group that said, you mean if I give it access to all of my stuff, that everything that's in my files is going to be a part of chat now, as in all of their clients' private information? And the person's like, yes. And that person was like, oh my gosh. And I felt so bad for them. Like I felt so bad for them and I felt so bad for the clients because literally, like that's what happens. And it's like, I am not willing to sacrifice that. And it's just, one of the baselines of being in the healthcare industry is like people's privacy. So that's number one, but also just like wanting to be very conscientious of what I share and what I'm putting in there. And so one idea I've had is like, could I create a separate email where I create things from baseline in a very strategic way and, keep everything very separate. So that's one thing, but I'm kind of digressing. I realize I'm going in a bunch of different directions, but basically it's like, can we be a little more critical in our thinking within this process and a little more compassionate in this process? And if you do choose to use AI, are you really getting excited about the newness? And so you're jumping on top of it ASAP and like trying to do the latest thing without waiting and watching to see what happens after the wave crashes? Or are you being a little more conscientious and a little more careful? Because I feel like the dialogue I'm hearing is people being like, you got to be a pioneer, you're going to make $1 billion. Or there's the fear of you better not do it, because if you don't do it, you're going to be obsolete. And there's just all these kind of dramatization pieces. Guess what? Dramatization sells. And I just really want you to be encouraged I want to encourage you to be centered in your decisions with this. If it feels a little off, just listen to that. Trust. Don't let anybody push you or pressure you into doing something that you don't want to do. Some things can't be undone. Sharing your data with ChatGPT, for example, opening up your entire 20, 15 years, whatever, of like using Google Docs, things like that. I don't even know how long it's been out there. I think I've been using it probably for about, I don't know how long, but it's close to that, Once you open it, you can't close it, So like, what are you putting out there? And are you sharing people's personal information? Are you sharing your personal information? I hear so many people say, look, I'm not that interesting. I'm like, are you not that interesting? Because if you weren't that interesting, companies wouldn't be paying like bazillions of dollars to get your data, because your data is what sells. Your data is the thing that influences people to paint things a certain way so that you put your energy, i.e., your money and your time and your gaze, to give them what they want. Now, yes, at times algorithm could be like, oh, I actually really needed that thing. And I get that, but the majority of it isn't that. Like the majority of it is like the reason I went with lo-fi, low-buy living in the 90s is because I realized, and this was not even like on a huge scale because I'm not like a wealthy person, at this time in my life, and especially at that time. And I was like, I'm just money is just kind of going out the door, like to Amazon. Why? Like, and then I thought, I don't want to support Amazon. I want to support local businesses. And if that means that I can't have certain things for a longer period of time because I have to save up for them, guess what? We used to do that back in the day. If that means I have to pay for shipping, guess what? We used to do that back in the day. If that means that I have to, save up to buy a larger bulk to get free shipping, that's also an option, and it took a lot of energy and a lot of effort to get off of the internet, like to get off of Amazon, which is a part of lo-fi, low-buy living in the 90s, got off Amazon, stopped relying on the get something in 2 days, get something in 24 hours. I don't want that in my life. Like I want to live as a human being. I want to live in this state in which my body was created, which is not to be hiking up and down in terms of dopamine and cortisol. Like I don't need to be on that roller coaster. I don't want to be on that roller coaster. I want a slower life. I like slower living. And I know that I do much better when I do that. And I'm a better person I'm showing up in the world in a better fashion. I'm showing up for other people in that way. And I just feel more comfortable in my skin. And this is largely what I work with people around and what I have for the past 20 years or whatever. But it's like the lo-fi was, I'm not really into being plugged into things all the time. So like, how can I break things apart? How can I fracture my phone so it's not everything in one container? It's not the Walmart of being, right? It was like, how do I break it down to where I'm able to utilize things that are separate from the phone instead of the phone? So that's part of the lo-fi, turning the internet off at my house, finding other ways around that. Low-buy, obviously cutting back what I spend. So I'm focusing more on quality. When I say quality, it's yes, the quality of the item, but also the quality of my expense, the quality of my purchase, the quality of my energy. My value is not based on getting the most for the less. My value is, where is my money going and what is that supporting and what can I get for that? Because I don't want to be out of integrity with the things I do. What have I learned through this? Most things are going online, and it is true. And, I used to scoff when it was like Walmart, your local store, but there are literally things that I couldn't find locally that the most local thing I could do was actually go into a box store at like a Walmart, which was crazy to me because 20 years ago, I never would have shopped at a Walmart, like legitimately. So there are times where that happens. So it's a give and a take, it's a give and a take because like, there are certain box stores that I will support now that I didn't support 20 years ago because it fits more of my ethos than just buying it on Amazon. If I can buy something from a small company that's on Amazon from that small company, I'll do it. And there are a couple items in the past 5 years that I have actually gotten off Amazon because I could not find them anywhere else. But I will spend hours sometimes trying to figure out how to get it in a way that fits my ethics because that's really important to me. I see money as energy. I see time as energy. I see everything that I put out there as energy. And I'm a very imperfect person. Like I'm not perfect. This is not me trying to be like, and I do this and I do that. It's not it. It's hard. It's not easy. And it's just like, I'm always learning new things. Right. And you realize like you give to one thing and then you're like, but then I have to, and how can I make it as you try to make the best decision all the time? We can't always make the best decision, but we try, right? So this is not about creating some sense of perfection. This is about creating a sense of integrity within yourself and where you spend your money and how you spend your time, right? So going to living in the 90s part, I was like, when did I feel present? It's when I lived in the 90s. It's the last time I remember feeling so relaxed and present was when I was on vacation in Mexico, and it was 2018, and I remember walking across a bridge and everything was so unplugged and it was this beautiful thing. And I just remember being like, I feel like I'm 20 again. This is like, it wasn't about youth, it was about presence. And I held on to that moment, and that's what got me to this point of being like, okay, how do I recreate that, in my own life? And so I started to think about what I did in the 90s and just like, kind of returning to that. And I think about even like of course, there's the article I wrote that was like, pardon me, but bleep you scan in like 2008, which was predicting all of this, which was just like, hey, stop worrying about the offshoring of jobs and start worrying about technology, because we've seen how this has affected bankers. We've seen how it's affected banks. And yes, there's some stuff still, like we don't have as many tellers, but we do have some tellers. But it was like, look at UScan. Right now we have one UScan, but eventually there will be a time where they're trying to force us down the throats of two, like, one or two human beings, and the rest are going to be UScan lines, and all those jobs have been lost, and they're making us do the work for them. And there's something wrong with this picture. Like, be aware, be aware. So if you have a grocery store where you love the experience, like there are certain stores that are like commercial, that they seem to refuse to go to UScan. And I'm a super fan of that. I'm like, that's awesome. I hope they really stick with that, because people go in there, they have a good experience. I don't know what it is. It's just such a good experience. Well, you have a lot of employees there that are making the place. It feels like a market. It feels like an actual community experience. And I think those are the places I want to support more than the places that are just relying on UScan. Do I always do it? No, because that one place is further away from where I live. But would I like to get that to the point in which my pattern is that? Yes, I would, So it's like bit by bit, we find little ways that we can show up differently. And it's all about carving that out. And so, um, yeah, this is a lot of information, but really the bottom line is about integrity and coming from your heart and paying attention to what you're putting out there. So if you're using AI, really think about putting community over clickbait, number one, right? Because AI right now is probably not going to be doing that for you, because most people are using AI to get like the most whatever, to be the most efficient in terms of the most popular. Because right now, for whatever reason, it seems like popularity seems to be like the golden nugget. It's not about compassion, right? It's about popularity. And it's like, come on, are we like five? I don't even know what age. It's probably more like middle school or elementary school that people are obsessed with that. But it's like, come on, like we can do better than that. I'm not trying to be mean, but seriously, we can do better than that. We're adults, right? We're adults. So like, it's just focusing on that outside of yourself a little bit more if you can. And like, just really looking at not putting, headlines over your humanity. It's just so disappointing. Like going back to that article, somebody brought it up and they're kind of talking about how it's framed. And I'm like, and I found myself being really critical. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing exactly what I said they shouldn't do, which is like assuming things and like, kind of critiquing. But I'm thinking like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Like, why do people put things out there that are so cruel and like lacking any empathy or anything like that? And the only thing I can assume is that person probably used AI to generate something. And I'm like, humans are consuming it through the lens still of a human maybe wrote this. We're still in that gray space, right? And it's like, I think it's just really important for us to be conscious of it. And so that's my rant for today. I hope it's helpful in some shape or form. And, if you have any questions, I have so much like to share on this stuff and just my own personal experience and just working with tons of people through this. One-to-one on different things that can help you, because I think you have the power to take control, to pause and to pivot. You don't have to ride this roller coaster. Like you can choose to get off of it. Number one, it does take some time. Number two, and like you have a choice. You are a sovereign human being and you can choose to cultivate in your life that which you want. If you feel like you're being dragged around by a collar, that's a really good sign to me. If you feel like you're a victim in the sense of like, I can't change, that's a really good sign to me of there's something inside of you that's like ready to break open and be like, I have to change. I have to change this. So, yeah. Anyway, have an amazing day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'm here if you need anything. Okay. Bye-bye.